name's Cunningham. I work in the automotive industry, been working in it all my life. Started out as basically a mechanic on cars, worked through to become a technician, test driver, and now basically sell cars for a living. So everything that I do in my life, I've dedicated it to the automotive industry, and obviously that's my passion really. I think I've come into having a passion about cars from a very early age. My parents weren't kind of automotive in any shape or form, but I was influenced by probably my grandfather, who was in the Second World War. He was a technician on aircraft. So maybe I think that's where I kind of got the influence for a mechanical kind of thing, and just love the colour of cars and the noise, and it's a real attack on the senses and the whole racing thing. So that's really where it stemmed from, I think. I've been racing for 26 years and I've never owned a racing car, but one thing I do own is my crash helmets. This is my very first crash helmet, which I designed and painted. I was working for Lamborghini at the time. It's quite a relevant helmet for me. I've had lots of crash helmets since, but it's the one that started, if you like, my racing career, and it's very special to me. The actual paint on this crash helmet is car paint, so these are actually the correct colours for Lamborghinis of the period. So they're actually Lamborghini car paint colours, so that was the reason for using these paints and designing it in this way. Growing up, obviously, you know, you're looking at different things on the TV. Started to watch, obviously, racing on the television, and that was the real kind of influence. We used to watch the Grand Prix, and then it wasn't, you only had a highlight show. It was only like 20 minutes, and it was at 10 o'clock at night, so it was quite special to be allowed to stay up and watch it. So yeah, that's really where I think the whole influence started with racing from a childhood. And then obviously as I grew up and developed, it kind of become more and more of a passion really. Everyone has their different favourites. I remember my mum always used to like Carlos Reutemann because he was a really good looking, handsome guy. My favourite at the time was Gilles Villeneuve. He wasn't the most successful driver, but he was the most spectacular. My father's point of view, I think he was more kind of James Hunt, Niki Lauda type thing. So yeah, you have a little bit of rivalry, but it became a kind of family tradition on a Sunday evening to watch the race, and that's kind of where it really kind of sowed the seed for my passion for it, and if you like, dedicating all my life to it in some respects. My first memory of going to any kind of circuit was really, I was around about 10, 11 years old. My father took me to a non-championship Formula One race at Brands Hatch. It was called the Reiter Champions. I was very fortunate. He had a contact that enabled us to get right into the pits, so I was really close to the cars. So it was an amazing attack on the senses, the noise, the colour, and the violence of it all, because to get up close to those cars of that period, it wasn't like today. They were really kind of real animals and beasts, and all these guys that were driving were real kind of characters. In terms of my first ever experience of racing a car, that came decades later, and really that was a race at Donington Park, which is based in the Midlands of England. And yeah, it was a wet race, I always remember it. Qualified reasonably well, I think I qualified 6th. Didn't set the world on fire, but finished 4th in the end, nearly got 3rd. And yeah, just felt, if I'm honest, I just felt really comfortable straight away as soon as I got in it. And it was typical kind of UK weather. It was chucking it down with rain, it's all cold and damp, your visor mists up, you can't feel your feet, your race suit's all wet. But yeah, that's kind of like the most vivid memory. But as soon as I got in the car and as soon as I started the race, I just felt like I belonged there, if that makes sense. It was probably the best analogy is like putting on an old pair of jeans. It just felt really comfortable, and I just knew that I had to do that from that moment onwards, really. So when I was 16, decided to leave school. Had to do something with cars because that was my passion, and I really wanted to aspire to get into racing or high performance cars. Very fortunate to get a job at a BMW dealership in London, in Vauxhall. As an apprentice mechanic. It was a really, really good environment, good workshop, major manufacturer, and a lot of exposure to a lot of technical things in terms of understanding every element of a car, really. So it gave me a great background and stepping stone to everything I've done later in life. One of the biggest influences which I think helped me with my racing, there was a gentleman called Tom who was my mentor and coach, really, and he taught me as a mechanic and technician. So that was probably the biggest influence in terms of racing and my future career and everything I do automotive. And he was probably the biggest influence in terms of that, I'd say. Well, when I was doing my apprenticeship at BMW, I was a really keen photographer. So I wanted to have a go at being a Grand Prix photographic kind of person. It's something you couldn't just get a career straight away. So I was still working on cars during the week, if you like, in a conventional sense. And then at the weekends I'll be going to circuits and and doing my photography and learning my craft doing that. Obviously the cars are the main thing, but for me I always like taking photographs of the drivers and trying to get their character come across in a lot of the shots. Senna's probably the most famous one of that period. My other hero is Nelson Piquet. He was one of my kind of favourite drivers. He was more of a complete person, I'd say, more of a character. Yeah, and it's just being in close proximity to these guys, and you get to know their character and their moods and trying to capture that on a picture. I was probably more, as a photographer, into capturing people than the actual cars to some extent. Basically more of the story to come across in a photograph rather than the action was my style, is probably the best way of putting it, really. Piquet he was just a real lad, really. He was, he'd turn up at a circuit with a different woman all the time, and he was a bit of a playboy. He was a bit of a joke, a bit of a character. He never took himself too seriously, but on his day he was the quickest driver at that time. He was quicker than Senna. He was the fastest driver, but it just depended what side he got out of bed, really. In some ways, just a more complete character for me than Senna, I'd say. You know. So this is Ayrton Senna's 1991 Marlboro McLaren Grand Prix car. I was actually taking photographs of him when he was driving this car in period, so it's quite a relevant car for me, if you like. There's a bit of history with myself and Senna in terms of some of the shots that I've managed to get of him driving this car, really. So it's quite an important, bit of history from the Grand Prix side of things, and obviously my association with Grand Prix racing as a photographer. So I was 26 years old, hadn't done any racing, so I've just decided I've got to do it now, I'll never have another opportunity. So I managed to save up some money and booked onto a racing driver's course at Donington Park at the Jim Russell Racing School. And it was a week-long course where they'd obviously train you as a driver, but you get to do your first race at the end of the week, so you get a racing licence. And I thought it was the best way to at least have a go at it to see if I liked it, rather than go and buy a car, which most people do. So I went up there. Again, as soon as I sat in a single-seater racing car, the first reaction was I was gutted, because I should have been in it when I was 18 or 17 or a lot earlier. That was probably the best memory I've got of it, because I just connected with it straight away. There was about 10, 11 other guys on the course. Most of them were a lot younger than me and all come through karting and everything else. So I was kind of like the old man almost then. But yeah, just really connected with it. It kind of felt normal. I'm very good with kind of gear changing and everything because of my mechanical background, and just loved the whole experience, really. It was a really good opportunity for me. They'd done a really good job, actually. It was a really good way of an introduction to try and become a racing driver. And then obviously done the race, the first race at the end of that week. It was raining, wasn't very nice, the weather was rubbish. But finished fourth. Wasn't a great result, but it was a start of, if you like, my racing career. Done a few races at the racing school after I'd done the week-long course, and then I got made redundant from my position at the time. So I needed a job, so I phoned up the boss of the racing school and said, look, is there any chance that I could work for you? He very kindly accommodated me, which is nice, because we had a little bit of a relationship, and basically worked up there for just over a year. And the deal was that I had to fix all the cars, work on the cars, do a bit of coaching, put cones out, paint white lines, whatever it was. And as part of the deal, I got 2 races a month as part of my wages. So it was a great opportunity to really be around racing cars 24/7. Fantastic experience. Met some really great guys that were doing similar sort of things. It was really good. It was a real kind of thing that really got me heavily into racing as a driver, gave me a lot of experience. And ultimately ended up winning a championship up there in the first year as well. So in that sense, it was, I was very, very fortunate to get the opportunity. After leaving Donington and having worked up there, won the championship up there and everything, decided that I had to go racing. So I basically hired a racing car from someone I knew, borrowed a trailer, even borrowed a race suit, boots and gloves. So the only thing I actually owned was a crash helmet, effectively. But the first memorable kind of race win doing it in that format was at Brands Hatch in '94. I was in an '84 Reynard, which is a fantastic race car. Again, it was probably the best race car I've ever driven. It really fitted me really well, and I could do anything in it. It's quite a competitive series. There was 28 cars on the grid, qualified about third. It was in the dry. It was a big race meeting at Brands Hatch. I had some friends and my parents were there to watch. got a good start, running third, but then got the lead into Paddock Hill on the first lap and took the 2 cars in front in one move into Paddock Hill, always remember that, and kept the lead for the rest of the race, won it. So that's quite a standout memory for me. It's one of my first major wins, if you like, in a really competitive kind of championship. In terms of my racing career, from that point on was after doing all the things at Donington, and it was just kind of doing as many races as I could possibly do, mainly in single-seater formats. Also picked up the odd drive in little sports cars as well. Always had the aspiration of being a professional driver, but really I didn't really see it on the radar at all, if I'm honest. Whatever money I could string together, I'd spend it going racing. That's probably the best way of explaining it. Just kept going until such time I could maybe get an opportunity to do it in a real professional context. Yeah, and just continued to carry on racing and do everything I can to pursue it, and there was more and more challenges to come. Pursued the racing career from my side of things and the situation I was in. There was a lot of sacrifices I had to make, a lot of struggles. I had to give up a lot of normal things to pursue it, but I was determined to carry on, and that was obviously my ultimate goal. So anything to help me get there, I would do without thinking. It wouldn't be a second thought. If there was an opportunity to drive a car, I would drop everything else, basically, whatever was going on at the time, which represented a lot of issues for work commitments, personal commitments and everything else, but that, there was only one focus really, and that was to drive a racing car. People only see the bit when you put the crash helmet on and get in the car. Like I say, most races, for example, and I've worked on years to get myself in one car in one race. It's not just one phone call and you turn up and you drive the car. It takes years and years sometimes to get things going. So it's all that effort that you don't see. You have to give up on relationships, friendships, and also it has an impact on your working career. It absorbs everything you do, really. But if you're going to be good at it, that's what you got. That's the reward, isn't it? So you make your choices, don't you? When I was racing for Reiter Engineering, which were the Works Lamborghini race team at the time, I was given the opportunity to be their chief test and development driver. One special car was the Murcielago RGT1 car, so I was basically the driver in terms of shaking the car down, doing all the aerodynamic development testing, reliability testing and all the components before they had the finished product that they could then put onto the circuit to race in a competitive championship. So that was a really interesting time for me, and that really played to my strengths in terms of my mechanical background and experience. All the testing took place on airfields, it wasn't on racetracks. So we'd go to an airfield and basically drive up and down a runway all around the link roads. In other words, create circuits and simulate kind of race circuits, but a lot of it was done at local airfields, and this was in Bavaria in southern Germany. So that was quite cool because I was dodging planes and all that kind of stuff at the same time. So always had a passion for Lamborghinis from a very early age, amazing car. So obviously the ultimate goal was to race one. So when I got the chance, obviously I jumped at it, and that was a dream come true really. The opportunity came about, I was working on Lamborghinis at the time as a technician on road cars, and one of the owners of one of the cars basically was interested in maybe going motor racing with one. So after about a year and a half of working with him and persuading him to really sponsor me to come into the Lamborghini Championship. So it was a lot of work, but I managed to get enough financial backing to take part in the championship. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo series, which is a one-make series for Lamborghinis, obviously sexy road cars. Quite a cool championship, very glamorous. In the early 2000s, when I got the opportunity to drive in it, it was basically a pan-European series that went around all the Grand Prix circuits around Europe, and it was a combination of basically a two-driver format, or you could do it as a single driver. So there was gentleman drivers, i.e. guys with a lot of money that want to go racing, and professional drivers all mixed in together. But the best part about it was you was racing against some ex-Grand Prix drivers, so from that point of view to go up against basically some of the guys that I watched as a child, and kind of they were my heroes. To actually race against them and beat them was quite a big tick in the box for me really, and a real sense of achievement. But it's a really cool championship. It's everything that motor racing encompasses. It's very glamorous, very noisy, really sexy cars, and it attracted a lot of characters as well, and obviously a lot of travelling and going to all the iconic venues around Europe. So it had all the right ingredients really. My first year in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series, basically I ended up winning the championship in my class, which I felt was quite an achievement for me personally. Racing on circuits that I've never driven on before, competing against some really top professional Grand Prix drivers and Le Mans drivers. So it was an amazing year, won 2 races outright in the first season. But the standout race win really was the following year in 2002. When I was racing against an ex-Grand Prix driver called Jean-Marc Gounon. At the time he never made it to the absolute pinnacle of Formula 1, but he was a real class driver, very talented, and to go up against someone like that and beat him on a level playing field in the same cars, which was a Lamborghini Diablo GTR, was really it justified all the years and before of all the hard work and the commitment and the dedication really, and it all paid off in that one race probably. I then started to work for Mercedes-Benz World, which is a driving experience centre for the manufacturer, and that was really involved in setting up driving experiences and also involved in doing demonstration drives, precision driving. So again, it's kind of relevant to all the racing background that I was doing. As part of my employment at Mercedes-Benz World, we set up a thing called the Silver Arrows Display Team, which is basically a stunt driving, precision driving type team with 4 guys, kind of dressed up like the Stig, similar to a Top Gear thing. So that was really exciting. It was a really cool thing to do, to be able to work out stunt routines and different things with cars, and basically putting on shows for people at the facility. And also we took it to other venues as well, so it all ties in with driving cars really quickly and sliding them around. But it was a really nice project to be involved with, and the actual team that we set up then still exists today. So it's still, there's a show every weekend at Mercedes-Benz World called the Silver Arrows Display Team, and I was one of the if you like, the founders of it really. So it's a little bit of a legacy that I've left there really. So leading on from that with the precision driving work, I've done a few things for Top Gear in terms of they hire a lot of drivers to do some of the kind of precision driving on events. So I worked down at Dunsfold on a few bits. I'm never really with the stars to some extent, more in the background, but again that was a good experience to work with real professional TV companies and crews and seeing how the whole program's put together. Basically they had a number of cars in a lot of scenes where there's 5 or 6 cars driving on circuits at any one time, and I was one of the drivers for that. So you don't see me or anything, but I'm in the background sliding the car around, so it's good fun and a good opportunity. Still continue to race now, never give up. I've been racing every year for the last 26 years, so it's part of my life. I can't imagine life without driving a racing car. Some years you get a lot of opportunities, some years you don't. The other aspect of it, really all my racing career, I've been coaching people as well, which I really enjoy. So that gives me opportunities to still be around the cars. And obviously pass on hopefully some experience, you know, all the things that I've learnt over the years. It's good to be able to pass it on to new people and hopefully assist them and you know, make it an easier path for them, and hopefully all the lessons I've learnt, they can pick up on that and develop their careers and follow their passions and dreams like I have. Along with my automotive career, my racing career, another passion of mine is kind of art and design. So I've designed a lot of crash helmets, a lot of race suits over the years for different people. Also to do with when I was working for Mercedes-Benz World with the display driving team. So it's a really important part of my creative side. This is my latest crash helmet that I've designed and painted. Just gives you some idea of the sort of things that I come up with. So all my passions are all focused into one direction, and that's racing, but you know, it's all part of my life really. The thinking behind this crash helmet is simple block colours really stand out. Most modern crash helmets are far too busy for my liking. Obviously the lightning bolts give it speed, give it some character, and it just looks a little bit mean really, I think. The reason I've got the name Slippery on all my crash helmets is basically my nickname. I was given that a long time ago and it's kind of stuck. And I just think it's cooler to have your nickname on a crash helmet than your own name really. It's just kind of my style and kind of my way of going about things. So Slippery's a nickname. Unfortunately it's got nothing to do with driving, but that's another story which I can't go into now. My most recent race was in a Formula 3 car at Brands Hatch last year. I hadn't raced the car for over a year. Quite a fast car, quite a special car to drive. Brands Hatch is one of my favourite circuits. Really pleased I've finished third in race 1 and I won race 2 in a field of about 30 cars, so it still shows that I'm competitive and can still do the job. I mean, it doesn't matter how good or bad you are, if you've got a lot of experience you still need to practice, and if you haven't got the opportunity to practice it makes it even harder. But ultimately that's been my racing career. I've never had the best scenario in terms of practice and preparation. I've just had to jump in and do the best with what I've got, really. So qualified third, it was dry. Car felt okay, it was good. You get on the grid, start the race, got a good start, was running in third. Towards the end of the race, the two guys in front were obviously jostling for position. They made a little bit of a mistake and they both touched, and I managed to nip in front of them on the second to last corner and won the race. So yeah, so it's a great feeling. It's one you never get tired of. It's probably the best sensation in the world when you win a race, because it's not for anyone watching you, it's for yourself. You have expectations of where you should be, and to win a race or to be the fastest, it's always, you want to be doing that all the time. It's actually quite difficult to achieve it. So to not have raced for a year, not practiced, and jump in a car and be competitive and win was very, very satisfying, really. So I don't have any regrets at all. The only one that really stands out, I wish I'd have got in the car earlier. That would be the biggest thing, really. But I still think I'm very lucky to have achieved what I've done so far, and I still think there's a lot more of my story left. I think I've got another 10 years of racing, and I'm still going to push, and I'm still going to do everything I can to get in a car, really, because I just love it so much.